Now on today's video, I'm going to demonstrate how I replaced the clutch cable from my parts bike to the bike that has an active registration. It's a relatively simple job, but while a bike is apart, I try to include some of the other things that are worth doing while you have a bike apart, like doing some engine cleaning, and also when you're checking out the bike before you put the tank back on, check out the wiring, the air filter, a bunch of other little tips that may be useful. And of course, how to get the clutch cable rerouted back in, get both ends hooked up, and a final adjustment. And it's not a real difficult job really on this bike. I don't think it's a difficult job on any bike with a cable operated clutch, but sometimes it can be intimidating and you can't figure out what to do first or get the horse before the cart. I tried to do this and not leave out any steps. I hope this is useful information. 1100. I liked it so much I bought another one. So I have a spare bike. Actually, this is the real bike. This is the real body work. We've played mix and match with seats and chairs and body work and tanks and everything. But luckily, and it's very lucky for me, that I have a spare bike. Anybody that has 35-year-old motorcycles knows how important a spare bike can be. And why is this bike all apart? Well, today I come back from a beautiful ride. I mean beautiful. Leaves changing, everything. About 150 miles. I get back to within 2 blocks of my house. I squeeze the clutch. And as I squeeze the clutch, I hear a loud ping. And I'm sure anybody that's ever had an old bike, a 35-year-old bike, knows what this is. It's a broken clutch cable. Now, it had a kink up here, which I don't know if that contributed to it, was part of it. I mean, you got to realize this stuff is 35 years old. So what I did, I carefully took it apart. That's goes without saying is the easy part. Now, one of the things I try to do is I try to keep the bikes reasonably clean where I'm going to work on them, because to do this now I'm going to have to snake that cable in up and around here, take this lever off. I'm going to try to do it step by step so I can show the way I do it anyway. I'm sure other people have some tricks that maybe they would like to share on YouTube, but right now getting the old clutch cable off is pretty idiot proof. In the worst of all worlds, take wire cutters and just cut it off and take the little furl off the end. We did absolutely. This will not be rebuildable. We will not be using this one over. But I always save the old cables because I might want that fitting for some custom bike in the future. Might want that little rubber boot. Might need that spring. So I have my cabinets over there that are all full of used motorcycle parts. And at the end of this day, we'll add that to it. But I guess if you get 35 years, you know, when you come down to it, I've owned this bike for half of my life. I'm 71. Half of my life. That's hard to believe. The bike, actually, I know what you're thinking. The bike's in better shape than he is. And you're probably right. But anyway, pulling a bike apart. Step one, you got to pull a tank, the seat. That's 5 minutes of work to get it down to where it is like now. And what I always do is when I have it in this, I'll always get a clean rag and some either wax or detailing material and clean up anything that looks dirty. Now, I try to keep this relatively nice and clean because when I work on it, I don't like working on something that's like cleaning a sewer. Now, one of the things I'd like to share before we put the where the hell's the seat? Before we put this all back together again and put the new cable in, I always have, this is I think a trick. So simple, but a lot of people don't know it. This is an ordinary painting stick. And this is an ordinary waxing rag or whatever. Maybe with a little compound or something on it. But what this allows me to do is get into spaces and clean this all up. So the next time I have to take this apart, and it does come apart from time to time, because we just do the ordinary maintenance on it, but the cleanup, while I have it apart, it'd be a sin not to clean all this up. And down in here where you really can't get when the tank is on. Now another thing, whenever I see some little spot that I can't get, a little bit of carburetor cleaner is good. Never use that stuff when the engine's hot. I've let this cool off before I work on it because I don't want to sit out here and cook. But this stick makes a lot of the cleanup possible that normally you can't figure out how to get in there or how to get your fingernail in there. We did make a video at one time. In fact, it was one of the ones that has, I think it's still one of the ones that has the most hits of how to polish and clean the aluminum engine. Anyway, I wanted to, while I was having this apart, any kind of maintenance like this, I just like to clean it up, because what's going to happen the next time I have to do this, I really don't want to have to go through this again. And if you maintain it at some level, I mean, for me, I enjoy working on motorcycles. Now, obviously, not everybody does. Some people would rather piss their life away on, you know, some less productive thing. Growing cucumbers, for instance. But anyway, I do enjoy it, and it is good exercise. And what's nice is, instead of going to the gym and having to pay a membership, this bike has become my gym. And when I'm done working on it, believe me, I'm tired. Anyway, we did get this pretty well cleaned up in the last, I don't know. And I like to keep it clean. And I like to keep it clean that when I take it apart, it's clean. Not just the obvious things, but anyway, the other bike is not clean. So getting that other cable off is going to be a greasy, dirty job. Yeah, that's okay. I'd rather put that time into this bike, which I've had since it's new. It's kind of my baby. Anybody that's had a bike 35 years knows the relationship you build with it. It's certainly not a perfect bike, but some of my friends, Aaron, Tim had a GS up until not long ago, until he went to the dark side. But doesn't really matter. It's, if you maintain it, if you keep it clean, and you do these maintenance, and in the best of all worlds, if you really love a bike and you can pick up like I did for almost no money. Ray helped me pick this bike up in Philadelphia. If you can get a bike cheap and have it for a parts bike, wow. Any part on here within reason, it's just so handy, and then you have extra wheels and an extra tank and everything. But anyway, time to pull that cable off. Having a spare bike, of course, is a real luxury at times like this. I have an extra set of levers even. All the simple parts that make you crazy when you have to go out and find them on the internet. So the first step on this, getting this old cable out, is if I can get this to pull enough, and I really can't, so I guess I'm going to have to disconnect it at the other end first. Normally, or I shouldn't say normally, at some point in time, you can take the bolt out of here too, that's another way. But I've got to be able to disconnect this end of the cable. And if this were mounted to a handlebar, it would be a little bit easier. But anyway, by lining up these notches, and I guess this is the part I wanted to show the most. If you line up these three notches, the notch in the adjuster, and the notch in the ferrule, what you should be able to do is, when I loosen it at the other end of the cable, I should be able to just pull this up without damaging the cable. Of course, after all this, I don't want to damage the cable. Now, just to make this a little easy, because this bike is up against the wall, it's going to be difficult to get the other end out. What I did, I took the bolt out. By having a bolt out, I could line up, again, they just went out of alignment because they're loose. I could line up these three things, and I want to do it very gently without damaging the cable, and I can pull a cable out. I can just put these down. I can take this apart, and I'll look to see that this cable is in good shape. It's got plenty of grease on it, oh yeah. And the test is I run my finger on here and feel for some sharp spots. No sharp spots, we're good to go. Now, this is a trick that works with some motorcycles. I don't want to, if I don't have to, disconnect the fuel line and the vacuum line and all the wires that go to the tank for the fuel gauge. What I did, I just loosened the tank at the back and put a rubber hammer in there. Now, by doing that, it's given me some space in here, and I'm hoping, see, I couldn't do this with the other one. There was a simple reason, is I had a zip tie on. But it looks like this one I can slide out. Wow, that makes it nice and easy. I like easy. Easy is good. Now, the other end of this that's on the other side of the motorcycle is going to really be a pain in the neck, because we have the other parts bike so close, and I don't want to move them. The other one has, the wheels are off of it. So I'm going to have to, well, I got to think about this for a minute. And the other end of it is down in a black hole in space down there. And it's just got to be unscrewed out. There's a cotta pin in that end. And if it's our lucky day, we can get that out without too much work. But again, for that green bike, the green bike, we have a whole parts bike that we've used many parts off. It's really not a full parts bike anymore. And little by little, this guy, I can't, when I bought this bike, I had no idea how useful it would be. It has proven to be so useful in every way. There's just so many things, and today is a perfect example. Otherwise, I'd have to be out on the internet now looking to buy this cable instead. Actually, several other people have taken parts off of it. Now that nut was really on there tight, so what I did, I put a little WD-40 on it, set up a drop light so it'll be a little easier to work on. Now the problem is, to move these bikes around, it's really difficult. They're not just put up the kickstand and move them. I've got them all sitting here as condensed up against the wall as possible, because I really don't have the room for anything else in this shop. But as soon as that WD kicks in, I'm going to unthread that. I love having a parts bike. What a luxury. Now what I resorted to make it a little bit easier, because unthreading this was really a bear. I had to do it a millionth of a turn at a time. But it made it a little bit easier just by one bolt taking off the arm. Now I have to take this cotter pin out to free that end up. Check that this cable is in really good shape, and it is. It absolutely is. So, and I'm sure, you know, the funny thing about this is when you have an older bike and you go to buy the parts you're buying might not be any better than the ones you already have. So the parts bike again has rescued us from, and maybe you could buy this new from Suzuki. It'd probably be real expensive though. And a parts bike, usually once they don't run, this one has a bad engine bearing. Once it ends, the rest of the parts on that bike, you get them really nice and cheap. Now another tip, I'd just like to share something. Both of these gas tanks are full of gas. Even though I may never need that tank, I may never need this one, but by keeping them full of gas, actually I have them full of premix with oil in it. If I want to use this tank, and it's a parts bike tank right now, or for whatever reason I don't want it to rust, or whatever. And what's very funny, and I thought it was funny anyway, when Luciano went to do his RD, and he wanted to put that tank fits on an RD, by the way, and he went out and paid, I think, $200 for the tank, and then we didn't have the cap. The cap was $100. Well, when I think about that, the whole parts bike now makes sense, because even if we don't use parts of the engine, when I think of the investment I have in both of these parts bikes, to be able to support this without having to go out on eBay, wow. And boy, today is just the perfect day that we've taken advantage of a small part that might be difficult to get or expensive or used and be worse than the one we had or just as bad. It's really saved the day. So I don't want to turn this video into a part bike video, but that might be a subject for another day. But I have used other things off it. I've used the wheels, of course. I've used all the body work. I have a spare set of carburetors now. And when I bought this bike, I developed a little relationship with the guy. In fact, I went back to his house in Philadelphia more than once. And he found a box of parts that he had. He had bought a chain for the bike. I have a brand new chain, but it's a 630 chain. And he gave me an extra battery. So it turned out to be just the best of all possible worlds. Something to consider if you have an old bike and you're going to try to maintain it now, because I've had this 35 years. The odds are good I'm going to have it till the day I die. To have, and I'm definitely never going to sell that green bike. And what am I talking about? I'm never going to sell anything. I don't want to sell anything. Anytime I can get a spare bike for $200-300 and just have it, if I could squeeze it in my garage. I've even thought of hanging them up on the rafters. It's something that when you have an older bike, it's worth considering if you want to keep it. And of course, before I put this back, I've pulled pull this, all the hardware up, because I want to do it from both ends, and I'm just dripping ordinary 3-in-1 oil in there. You can use chain lube, you can use bacon fat, whatever. But if you just wait a couple seconds, it drips in. As soon as I see it dripping out the other end of the cable, I know I'm done. And then I'll turn it over and let it drip from this side to the other side. And that little, not only does it make for a nice smoother movement, but hopefully prevent oxidation of any kind. And plus this is the last clutch cable I have for this bike. May have to buy another parts bike. So the next step on this is, you can see the threaded ports in there. I have to go from the back, squeeze my little hand in there and get that threaded, and this will be one adjustment. See, both ends of this cable have an adjustment, and I have to hook it up just like a dummy dry fit, then hook up the other end and see which end is going to be the more convenient to adjust, because what will happen is you want to have the adjustment at the label, so there's some play and you can take the play in and out. You don't really want to have to adjust it down here, but you've got to set the adjustment right at the beginning like this. And once that's just rough adjusted, then I have this little pin that goes in there. That's going to get a cotter pin when we're totally done. And I still want to have, I have to attach the other end. I have to thread the cable up through the frame and exactly the way it was, and then take that lever off and get that lever, get everything nice and loose, and then put a little bit of play up there and then take the rest of it out at the bottom, so that I can do my final adjustment from the lever, which is a lot more convenient than doing it down here. Well, we got that one end in, it's all threaded through. I put some nice grease on this. Grease that all up. Get that to slide in there. Now I want to back this out, because the cable in essence is not going to get shorter, it's going to get longer. So if we can allow, let's be at least in the past the middle of this adjustment. Oops. There we go. Get the bolt, get the lock washer, make sure there's plenty of grease. Now see, that's under tension, so we're going to have to loosen it down at the other end. Now after all these adjustments, that's about the amount of play we have in there, and we've got plenty of the adjustment. We're not even close to the middle here, because more than likely as the cable stretches, if it didn't stretch in 35 years, maybe it'll stay that way forever. That's about how much play I usually would keep in this. Now, once I'm done with any job like this, it's very easy. I want to look around at all of the cables, all of the wires. If I see any wire that's being frayed, because again, this stuff is under the tank and you don't really see it. It looks like everything's pretty solid there. Everything looks pretty solid. Before we put this back together, I'll take the air filter out and just blow it out with the compressor, reverse blow it out. I think we're ready to put the tank and everything back together. And I always think, you know, I always look up here and think, oh, I forgot something. Oh, there's a screw or a bolt. No, there really isn't. I checked. Alright, just time to put all the parts back. The bodywork, the seat. Trick that's worth its weight in gold is when you're putting these side covers back on, just take one little dab of Vaseline or grease of some kind and just put a little bit on the bushings, and it just prevents the tabs breaking off from time to time. And I have fixed 1,000,000 of those tabs over the years. Well, it's all back in one piece. I hope you enjoyed sharing this little adventure. And of course, as we always say at the end of every video, thanks for buying a spare bike. Seriously, that is a great idea. If you can afford it, or if you can find one, and you have an old bike like this, I guess that's really the message you could take from this video. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and you maybe even picked up some useful tips on doing this kind of maintenance or something similar, and keeping the bike clean, keeping it running as good as you can, and keep these older bikes going. That is the focus of everything we do in the shop, to keep them going. And thanks so much for watching.